السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. To firstly go through the Ibarah, Ibn Hajar rahmallah says, والثاني وهو ما سقط من آخره من بعد التابعي هو المرسل، فصورته أن يقول التابعي سواء كان كبيرا أم صغيرا قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كذا أو فعل كذا أو فعل بحضرته كذا أو نحو ذلك ونحو ذلك. وإنما ذكر في قسم المردود للجهل بحال المحذوف لأنه يحتمل أن يكون صحابيا ويحتمل أن يكون تابعيا، وعلى الثاني يحتمل أن يكون ضعيفا ويحتمل أن يكون ثقة، وعلى الثاني يحتمل أن يكون حمل عن صحابي ويحتمل أن يكون حمل عن تابعي آخر، وعلى الثاني فيعود الاحتمال السابق ويتعدد، أما بالتجويز العقلي فإلى ما لا نهاية له، وأما بالاستقراء وهو أكثر ما وجد من رواية بعض التابعين عن بعض. So the first type which Ibn Hajar rahmallah explained was that when they are missing links in the very first link of the chain, that is above the narrator, if there's a missing link there, then such a narration will be called mu'allaq. Now Ibn Hajar rahmallah discusses the second type, and that is where the missing link is on the other side of the chain. So it is at the end of the chain. But look at how specific his words are. He says, وَهُوَ مَا سَقَطَ مِنْ آخِرِهِ مَنْ بَعْدَ التَّابِعِي هُوَ الْمُرْسَلِ. From those who are after the tabi'in, if that link is left out, then it will be called mursal. So this here is a topic upon which probably there is the most disagreement, that there's so much differences with regards to the ruling of it. And inshallah, if we get a chance at the end, after we go through the Ibarah, then we'll explain all the differences. But firstly, to look at the lugwi meaning and how it links with the technical meaning, taking from Fathul Mughith, Mullah al-Qari rahmallah explains, when we're doing Muqaddamah ibn Salah, we quoted it directly from Fathul Mughith. But now since we're doing Nuzha an-Naḍar, so we look at a book which is linked to Nuzha an-Naḍar, so therefore we quote it from Mullah al-Qari's commentary. That it could be derived from one of three words. The first is itlaq. So itlaq means to release. It comes in the Quran in verse 83 of Surah Maryam. أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّا أَرْسَلْنَا الشَّيَاطِينَ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ تَؤُزُّهُمْ أَزًّا. So we have released the shayateen on the disbelievers. Likewise in the Ḥadīth, it comes in Bukhari, Muslim, many other books. إِذَا أَرْسَلْتَ كَلْبَكَ وَسَمَّيْتَ فَكُلْ. Your hunting dog, once you send your hunting dog, you release the hunting dog. So Mullah al-Qari rahmallah says that فَكَأَنَّ الْمُرْسِلِ. So you get two words. One is mursal. Mursal is the narration in which there is irsal, and mursil is the one who is making irsal. فَكَأَنَّ الْمُرْسِلِ أَطْلَقَ الْإِسْنَادِ. That he just released the sanad. وَلَمْ يُقَيِّدْهُ بِرَاوٍ مَعْرُوف. And he didn't put a qid of it within what the narrator dating from. So that is the first meaning. The second meaning is that it comes from mirsal. So mirsal means to be fast. In Arabic, they describe a camel which can travel fast by saying naqatum mirsal. So if you take it from this meaning, then the link between the literal meaning and the technical meaning is كأن المرسل أسرع فيه فحذف بعض إسناده. That the person who was narrating it, the tabi'i, when he was narrating it, then he hastened in it. He didn't he didn't take the name of the sahabi. So that's the second word it could be derived from. The third word is it is separated. من قولهم جاء القوم أرسالا أي متفرقين. So here you can see it means to be separated. Why? لأن بعض الإسناد منقطع من بقيته. Portion of the sanad is separated from the other part of the sanad. So these are the three meanings which Allama Sakhawi firstly gave, and thereafter Mullah al-Qari rahmallah quoted. But then there is also the meaning of mab'uth, something which is sent. So Allama Baqa'i rahmallah, he gave this meaning in An-Nukatul Wafiyah, huwa min al-risala, and he explained كان كأنه قد أرسل الحديث إليه بتلك الأداة التي أضافه بها إليه فأشبه البعيد الذي وصلت ما بينك وبينه برسول بلغه عنك ما تريد. So it is as if he is just sending this narration. So these are the four meanings. And if it comes in this meaning of that all the Anbiya, the messengers, they were called Rusul because of this. Over and over, so many verses in the Quran, the word Arsalna comes. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا مِّن قَبْلِكَ. So you can see it could either come in this meaning. Now the way Ibn Hajar Rahmallah gave the definition, he used the word tabi'i and he used it for a reason. He didn't use the word akhir al-sanad. So although Al-Malaqani Rahmallah mentions in Qada al-Watr that وَلَوْ قَالَ مَا سَقَطَ مِنْ سَنَدِهِ بَعْدَ التَّابِعِي أو مَا سَقَطَ آخِرُهُ كَانَ أَخْصَرُ وَأَظْهَرُ. That a definition should be jami' and mani', it should be as short as possible and convey the full meaning. So he's suggesting that Ibn Hajar could have just said مَا سَقَطَ آخِرُهُ. However, the way Ibn Hajar Rahmallah defined it is because it excludes the marasil of Sahaba. So we know exactly what he is talking about, because remember he's talking here about Mardud. All this here is under the chapter of Mardud. And the marasil of Sahaba are not Mardud, they are Maqbul. So Al-Malaqani Rahmallah then himself appreciated this qualification and this restriction. And 3 pages later he said وَخَرَجَ بِالتَّابِعِ الصَّحَابِ فَإِنَّهُ يُحْكَمُ لِحَدِيثِهِ كَذَلِكَ بِحُكْمِ الْإِتِّصَالِ. That if a Sahabi has to hear from another Sahabi, but he doesn't mention that he heard from another Sahabi. 61, we gave many examples of how Sahaba who accepted Islam in the very later portions, like Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anh, is narrating things which happened in the very earlier portion of Islam. So obviously he heard it from another Sahabi, but he's not taking that Sahabi's name. So those are marasil also. It's also called Mursal. It's a marasil of Sahaba. But those are accepted and they do not feature under this section of Mardud. So therefore Ibn Hajar Rahmallah used the word tabi'i, and he said مَا سَقَطَ مِنْ آخِرِهِ مَنْ بَعْدَ التَّابِعِ. It has to be after the tabi'i. Now Ibn Hajar Rahmallah elaborates on this here by giving a scenario, and he says وَصُورَتُهُ أَن يَقُولَ التَّابِعِيُّ سواء كان كبيرا أم صغيرا قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كذا أو فعل كذا أو فعل بحضرته كذا ونحو ذلك. Basically a tabi'i, irrespective whether he is a junior or whether he is a senior, he attributes anything to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then such a narration will be called mursal. So here he made it a point to say that سواء كان كبيرا أم صغيرا. Mullah al-Qari rahmallah again, he quotes from Alama Sakhawi explaining who is a senior tabi'i, بأن لقي كثيرا من الصحابة وجالسهم وكانت جل روايته عنهم. So he's saying بأن لقي كثيرا من الصحابة. The preferred view is that this point here to say that he met a lot of Sahaba, this here is just ittifaqi. That generally if a person meets a lot of Sahaba, then he would narrate from a lot of Sahaba. But it is not essential that he met many Sahaba. Rather, the focus is on riwayat. So even if he just met one or two Sahaba, and he only narrated from them, then since his narrations are only from Sahaba, he will be regarded as a senior. So Alama Baqa'i rahmallah said, الظاهر أن المعيار إنما هو كون جل روايته عن الصحابة ولو كان صغيرا. That even if he might be junior in terms of age, but if majority of his narrations are from Sahaba, then if he will, and obviously a majority of his narrations can be from Sahaba if he met. So that therefore we are saying that is what generally happens, that a person would meet a lot of Sahaba, and that is how. But it's not essential that he meets a few. Then age does not matter. So Al-Malaqani rahmallah said, ليس المراد بالكبر والصغر ما يرجع إلى السن. وإنما المراد بالكبير من جل روايته عن الصحابة. That the meaning of a senior is that majority of his narrations are from a Sahabi. So the entire basis is the amount of riwayat, and it has nothing to do of age. And therefore you see Shaykh Nuruddin Itriya in the Taliqat, he says هو الذي روى عن كبار الصحابة. That he's the one who narrates, and likewise also Shaykh Abdullah Rahili, that he admits that he takes a lot from Shaykh Nuruddin Itr. So he said التابعي الكبير هو الذي يروي عن كبار الصحابة وهذا يكون أغلب روايته عن الصحابة. So that is a senior tabi'i, one who majority of his narration are from Sahaba. And then a senior tabi'i is بأن لم يلق من الصحابة إلا العدد اليسير أو لقي جماعة مع كون جل روايته عن التابعين. That majority of his narrations are from the tabi'in. He is regarded as a junior tabi'i. So again, the focus is on who he narrates from. Sheikh Abdullah Rahili says that وأما التابعي الصغير فهو الذي يروي عن صغار الصحابة وهم الذين تأخرت وفاتهم وهذا يكون أغلب روايته عن التابعين. That majority of his, because obviously now as time is going, more and more Sahaba are passing away. So those who are being born now later on, they will only manage to meet a few Sahaba, and most of their teachers will be tabi'in, the senior tabi'un. So there's a difference between a junior and a senior tabi'i. But the point to note here is that the author is clearly mentioning that there is no distinction between a junior and a senior tabi'i. In both cases, it will be called a mursal. So Mullah al-Qari quotes an explanation of the author, and he says, وَقَالَ الْمُصَنِّفْ لَمْ أَرَ التَّقْيِيدْ بِالْكَبِيرِ صَرِيحًا عَنْ أَحَدٍ. He's saying that I haven't found anyone clearly mentioning and confining it to a senior tabi'i. In Muqaddamah ibn Salah, you remember we done that he's not given the definition, he was presenting a scenario. So therefore, but to qualify it in the definition that it has to be a senior tabi'i, thus from this quotation here is saying that I haven't found anyone clearly qualifying it in that way. نعم قيد الشافعي رضي الله عنه المرسل الذي يقبل إذا اعتذر بأن يكون من رواية التابعي الكبير ولا يلزم من ذلك لا يسمى ما رواه التابعي الصغير مرسلا. Although Imam Shafi'i put it as a condition, and we will discuss more about that later on, that if for his narration to be accepted, he has to be a senior. But that doesn't mean that if his junior tabi'i has to narrate something, then it will not be called mursal. So one is the definition and one is the ruling. There is a difference between a definition and the ruling. The definition is that all of it will be, whether it's a junior tabi'i, whether it's a senior tabi'i, whether it is one person who met just one sahabi and heard one narration from him. So it will still be called a mursal narration. That's the definition. But then the ruling is that only if he is senior, then it will be accepted. So this here is the general meaning of mursal. There's no difference. It's just where a tabi'i is narrating directly from the Prophet ﷺ. And this here then became the popular definition. Now the point which we always stress on is that it was scholars who came much later on who started to give all these definitions. They are the ones who studied the usage of the earlier scholars. So we find that earlier scholars used mursal in different ways as well. And hence there are other opinions. So Alam al-Qani gives a few other scenarios that innahum, this is what we just spoke about. If he is senior tabi'i, but like we said, that Ibn Hajar is mentioning that he haven't found anyone who clearly mentions it. And Ibn Salah rahimahullah mentions it, but he's mentioning a scenario. He's not mentioning the definition. On page 51, he said, وَسُورَةُ الَّتِي لَا خِلَافَ فِيهَا حديث التابعي الكبير الذي لقي جماعة من الصحابة وجالسهم. So this is the second scenario. Then the third scenario which al-Laqani rahmallah mentions is ما سقط منه راو من أي موضع كان. So here it's being specified to the end of the chain, what was referred to as Asl Sanad under the chapter of Fard. It's the end of the chain. But other scholars, they would take it that irrespective of where the missing link is, it's not specified to only be at the end of the chain. Irrespective to where the missing link is, it will be called a mursal. So Mullah al-Qari rahmallah mentions about this here, and he says, وَأَطْلَقَهُ الْفُقَهَاءُ وَالْأُصُولِيُّونَ عَلَى قَوْلٍ مَنْ دُونَ التَّابِعِ. That the fuqaha and the usuliyun, they have taken it, even if it's others besides the tabi'i. If they have used the word munqati'an kana mu'talan, qala an-Nabiy sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that if anyone has to say, if there's any missing link at any stage in the sanad, it will be called a mursal narration. Basically, anyone besides the sahabi saying qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, it will be called a sahabi. It will be called a mursal. Anyway, even muhaddithun who used the term for general inqita', Imam Hakim, rahmallah, he said that Huffaz of Hadith, they very seldom used to make a distinction. In his Ma'arif Ulum al-Hadith, he says that النوع التاسع من هذا العلم معرفة المنقطع من الحديث وهو غير المرسل. So according to him, it's clearly منقطع and mursal are two different things. وقل ما يوجد في الحفاظ من يميز بينهما. But the Huffaz, there are very few who created the distinction. And then, if you remember on page 57, Sheikh Alama Ibn Hajar rahmallahi mentioned there that some create a distinction between the verb, etc. لكنه عند إطلاق الاسم وأما عند استعمال الفعل المشتق فيستعملون الإرسال فقط فيقولون أرسله فلان. So like that, you have all of these different. In fact, Alama Khatib rahmallah, according to him, the definition of irsal is when someone is narrating from a person who passed away before he was even born. In Al-Kifaya, he says, لا خلاف بين أهل العلم أن إرسال الحديث الذي ليس مدلس هو رواية الراوي عمن لم يعاصره. That it's أو لم يلقه. That it's a narration of someone who you're not in the same era, or you were in the same era, but it's proven that you did not meet. So first he gives the names of the tabi'in, but then after that he mentions وبمثابة في غير التابعين نحو رواية ابن جريج عن عبيد الله بن عبد الله بن عتبة ورواية مالك بن أنس عن القاسم بن محمد. So you can see that there were other scholars who had a different meaning, and that's a point to keep it in mind. However, Ibn Hajar rahmallah, he clearly clarified his intent when he uses the term, what he is including under the chapter of Mardud. So now we know exactly what he is talking about. That's the first benefit. And the second thing is that after him, this then became the more common meaning, that now everybody, if you go and you ask anyone what's a mursal narration, they would say to you, a tabi'i is narrating or is repeating something to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now a person might ask that if a tabi'i gets his narration from a sahabi, then why is it mardud? Because you know that the sahaba, all of the sahaba were reliable. So the tabi'i most probably got it from the sahabi. Now remember again, this is according to Shafi'is, and we're going to discuss the other views later on. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah is explaining now, and he's saying that why is mentioned under the chapter of Mardud. He says, وَإِنَّمَا ذَكِرَ فِي قِسْمِ الْمَرْدُودِ لِلْجَهْلِ بِحَالِ الْمَحْذُوفِ. He's saying it's not necessary that a tabi'i heard from a sahabi. It could be that he is narrating from another tabi'i. So when you are doing Bayquniya, then the Ustad must have explained under the definition which Alama Bayquni rahmallah gave, that his definition was not entirely precise. You must be knowing it off by heart, and if not, then you're supposed to be knowing it off by heart. وَمُرْسَلْ مِنْهُ الصَّحَابِيُّ سَقَطْ. So there he specifies it, that Mursal is where the name of a Sahabi is left out. But it is not 100% precise. Rather, the way is where a tabi'i is transmitting directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and that is why Ibn Hajar rahmallah did also clearly mention or put the name tabi'i, and he didn't say ma saqata minu sahabi or ma saqata rawin fi akhir sanad. He clearly said ma saqata min akhirihi man ba'da tabi'i, because it could be that he is narrating from a sahabi or from another tabi'i. If he's narrating good. But if he is narrating from another tabi'i, then that tabi'i could either be reliable or weak. وَعَلَى الثَّانِي. So وَعَلَى الثَّانِي means that if he is narrating on the second scenario, what's the second scenario? وَيَحْتَمِلُ أَن يَكُونَ تَابِعِيًّا. That if he is narrating from another tabi'i. So if he is narrating from another tabi'i, one tabi'i narrating from another tabi'i, يَحْتَمِلُ أَن يَكُونَ ضَعِيفًا. It's possible that that tabi'i is weak. وَيَحْتَمِلُ أَن يَكُونَ ثِقَةً. And it's possible that he could be reliable. So it's not necessary that, oh yes, all the Sahaba were reliable, but for Tabi'in, there were definitely weak narrators in the link of the Tabi'un. Sheikh Ibrahim Lahim says, leave alone weak narrators, بل في التابعين من هو متروك الحديث. He says there were even those who were extremely weak, and he gives some names, مثل أبان بن أبي عياش, وزير بن أبان رقاشي, وعطية بن سعد الأوفي, وأبي هارون عمارة بن الجوين العبدي, والأسبغ من نباتة. You can see, and then he says, وبعضهم مكتر في الرواية. Some of these, they were so weak, but yet they narrated so many narrations. So it's very possible that this tabi'i is narrating from one of those who are weak. But maybe he could be reliable also. So now, assuming he is reliable, then Ibn Hajar rahmallah says that maybe the second tabi'i, so the one tabi'i is narrating from the other tabi'i who is reliable. Now the second tabi'i, he is narrating from a fellow tabi'i again. وعلى الثاني يحتمل أن يكون حمل عن صحابي ويحتمل أن يكون حمل عن تابعي آخر. It's possible firstly he narrating directly from the Sahabi or from another tabi'i. So if he is narrating from another tabi'i, again could be reliable or weak. So we do not know his status. And you remember 2 pages back, Sheikh Nuruddin Itr in the footnote on page 80, he says, وَنُنَبِّهُ الْآنِ إِلَىٰ أَنَّ سَبَبَ رَدِّ الْحَدِيثِ بسبب سقط من إسناده يرجع إلى أصل واحد والجهل بحال الساقط والاحتياط خشية أن يكون ضعيفا. That the whole reason why we are rejecting a narration if there is a missing link is because we don't know the status of that narrator. So if we don't know the status of that narrator, it's possible that that narrator could be weak. So now Ibn Hajar rahmallah is adding more. One tabi'i is weak or maybe is reliable and he's hearing from another tabi'i, but his point is already made from the first, that already the first tabi'i, if he's narrating from a second tabi'i, we don't know whether he's narrating from another tabi'i or from a sahabi. Because of that already, his point is already made there. So there's clearly no need for him now to go on like this here and give more and more scenarios and prove more and more links. With the first link from the very first tabi'i, we don't know whether is who is narrating from, therefore it is rejected and therefore it's narrated under mardud, finish, point made. And now he's saying that maybe he's reliable, maybe he's unreliable. It doesn't mean that if the first tabi'i did actually hear directly from the sahabi, because we don't know that he heard directly from the sahabi, the Shafi'i is meaning, so they will still reject it. And it's possible it is narrating from a weak narrator. So there is no need for him to add more scenarios. لكن المراد بيان سبب تكرير في المردود وعلى الأول ظهر المردود به فلا حاجة إلى بيان الاحتمالات فيهم. Nevertheless, Ibn Hajar rahmallah wanted to stress his point. So he explains that from one tabi'i there can be so many more links which are left out. And he continues and then says ويتعدد, and it could increase. One tabi'i narrating from another tabi'i who could either be reliable or weak, who's narrating from another tabi'i who could be reliable or weak, who's narrating from another tabi'i who could either be so many, there could be lots and lots of links between the tabi'i and the sahabi. He says, أما بالتجويز العقلي فإلى ما لا نهاية له. Logically, if you have to look at it, it could be countless. You can stretch your mind and you can assume the tabi'i who in turn heard from the third tabi'i who in turn heard from the fourth, who heard from the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, until the 900. The 900 tabi'i heard from the 901st. The 1000 tabi'i heard from the 1001st tabi'i. Like that, you can just go on and on and on. That is if you are looking at it theoretically. But because the tabi'in obviously were not countless, there was a limited amount of tabi'in, so ultimately it will reach the sahabi. Therefore, Alama Qasim ibn Qutb said in Al-Qawl al-Mubtakar on page 79, محال عند الأقل يجوز بين التابعي والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما لا يتناهى. كيف وقد وقع التناهي في الوجود الخارج بذكر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He's saying that it can't be countless because the tabi'in were limited and ultimately it's going to come to an end. But obviously his point, what Ibn Hajar is trying to do is trying to show that it can be really a very huge number. So this is what Mullah al-Qari responds, and he says, وَالظَّاهِرُ أَنَّهُ أَرَادَ الْكَثْرَ وَأَتَاهَ بما لا نهاية له مبالغة إذ من المعلوم عند العقلاء أن الانتساب إلى آدم عليه السلام أمر منتهى. So he's basically saying that Ibn Hajar rahmallah just tried to stress upon it as it can be. If you have to logically and look at it in theory, then there could be so many. But to save himself from this objection, Kamal bin Abi Sharif said that the author should have rather said لو قال فإلى ما لا ضابط له. Or if you had to say أما بالتجويز العقل فلا ضابط له لكان متجها, then it would have been better. But nevertheless, his point is that he's trying to show that if you have to look at it in theory, there can be so many links between the one tabi'i to the sahabi. It could be lots and lots of different links. That is in theory. But if you have to do it now, going by what we have managed to find, so وَأَمَّا بِالْإِسْتِقْرَاءِ فَإِلَى 6 أو 7. that from what we have managed to find what is reality, then between a tabi'i who narrated and between the sahabi, the maximum we have been able to find is 6 or 7. So here he mentions 6 أو 7. And then he says, وَأَكْثَرْ مَا وُجِدَ مِنْ رِوَايَةِ بَعْضِ التَّابِعِينَ and بَعْض. This is the most that has been found, that we know about it. This is the reality, that between the Sahabi, there were 6 or 7. So now why did he use the word "oh"? Is there a reason that he said 6 or 7? That if it was 7, then he could have clearly just mentioned there are 7. He wouldn't have to mention 6. And if it was 6 between the Sahabi and between the Tabi'i and the Sahabi, then why did he even mention 7? He could have just said 6. So what is the reason he's saying 6 or 7? So some commentators assume that he was doubtful. He did not know for sure whether it was actually 6 or whether it was 7. However, al-Qasim rahmallah, he says that 6 و 7 قال أو هنا للشك لأن السند الذي ورد فيه 7 أنفس اختلف في آخرهم هل هو صحابي أو تابعي، فإن ثبتت صحبته فإن تابعين 6 وإلا ف7 والله أعلم. So al-Qasim rahmallah is saying that he mentioned it because of doubt on one particular tariq, that in that one tariq which we know about, it all depends on the last narrator. Is that last narrator, it's a female, so is that last narrator, is she a tabi'i or is she a sahabiya? If she is a tabi'iyya, then it will be 6, or otherwise it will be 7. And if you regard it as a sahabiya, then it will be 6. So this is what Qasim rahmallah mentions. However, from the narration which we know about, and which we could assume that he is referring to, it is clearly 6. This narration here comes in Sunan an-Nasa'i and Sunan at-Tirmidhi. So now look at the sanad. That the sanad both from Imam Tirmidhi and Imam Nasa'i, it's Muhammad bin Bashar, although Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah added on, he also had it. But both of them heard it from Muhammad bin Bashar, who heard it from Abdurrahman bin Abi Layla, who heard it from Zaira bin Qudama. So everybody knows Zaira bin Qudama is not a tabi'i. So now the list of tabi'in starts from here. An Mansur, that's number 1. An Hilal, that's number 2. An Rabi' ibn Khaytham, that's number 3. An Amr ibn Maymun, that's number 4. An Abdurrahman ibn Abi Layla, that's number 5. Then after that, in Sunan Nasa'i, it comes An Imra'atin. And Imam Tirmidhi also says that it's actually proven وَرَوَى بَعْضُهُمْ عَنْ إِمْرَأَةِ أَبِي أَيُّوب. Some narrators clearly said that it's the wife of Abu Ayyub. And thereafter it comes an Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. So here you can see there are 5, and if the wife of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari is regarded as a tabi'iyya, then it will be 6. And if she's regarded as a sahabiyya, then it will be 5. So after narrating this here, Imam Nasa'i rahmallah said, ما أعرف إسنادا أطول من هذا. That this here is the longest sanad we have ever found. Likewise, Yaqub bin Abi Shayba also mentioned the same thing, that this here is the longest sanad. So, the strange thing is that Allama Suyuti rahmallah in his Hashiyah, he says, فيه ستة من التابعين أولهم منصور. So he's agreeing that the first is Mansur, but he's mentioning there are 6 tabi'in. That means he's taking this imra'ah of Abu Ayyub to be a tabi'iyya. However, there's very great chances that she could be a sahabiya as well. That the wife of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, if it's Ayyub al-Ansariya, she's the daughter of Qais bin Amr from the Khazraj tribe. Then Allama Ibn al-Athir mentions her in Usul al-Ghaba. Likewise, Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions her in al-Isaba. So she's definitely a sahabiya. If it is another wife, then maybe it could be the 6th. So still the difference is between 5 and 6, not between 6 and 7. Now Allama Khatib rahmallah wrote a kitab on this narration here. It's printed by Dar Fawaz with the name of Ḥadīth Sitta min al-Tabi'in. So the narration of 6 tabi'in. So even before we go to this kitab, if you look in Qadā'ul Watr, so Allama al-Laqani is quoting from Allama Khatib, and he's quoting it from Allama Khatib like this here. إن كانت امرأة أبي أيوب صحابية فهم 6 وإلا ف7. So he's clearly quoting. So remember, this here is the words which he's quoting from Khatib from this kitab of his. However, when we go to the kitab, then we find that he is counting the wife as the sixth. So Al-Khatib فقد اجتمع فيه ستة من التابعين بعضهم عن بعض. So he says فأولهم منصور, and then he proved it Sahaba he met. والثاني هلال, and then he mentions it Sahaba that he met Ali رضي الله عنه and Abu Mas'ud, etc. والثالث الربيع بن خثيم, right? That's the fourth is Amr bin Maymun. Then he mentions the fifth is والخامس عبد الرحمن بن أبي ليلى سمع عثمان بن عفان وعلي بن أبي طالب. And then he's mentioning the sixth. So the sixth is al-Imrat al-Ansariya التي لم تسمى, but so it's mentioned as Imrat al-Ansariya, but Imam Tirmidhi clearly told us that it's the wife of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. So definitely it could either be between 5 and 6 and not between 6 and 7. That if the wife of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari is a Sahabiya, then it's 5. So the maximum will be 5 tabi'in and then a Sahabi. And if it's another wife, maybe he married another wife after the Prophet ﷺ, then it will, or maybe he married a wife with the Prophet, or did not meet the Prophet ﷺ, then it will be 6. So there's no scope for 7. So this here is what Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning and trying to prove his point, that imagine how many missing links there could be, and based on that we will have to reject a mursal narration. Inshallah we'll continue from here. And jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.